model of, I would say, economy, not only industrialization, but of the economy, also recognizing other forms, we also would come to forms, different forms of industrialization. And this would come to economic policy. But I would also say it's not only the right economic policy, it's also to change class relations. It's to change who decides on the investment. And this is not at all democratic, it's power-driven, it's very linked to financial market and to speculative capital. This is the debate we need, but I'm very modest concerning Lithuania. I could tell you a bit about Austria and the German debates, but I think I take this up as a point for us and for a new left and democracy. Yeah, I knew that.
Okay, other questions?
Okay. You mentioned the issues in Germany of efficiency, there's sufficiency. I'm just interested, okay, what are trends, how many, what people think generally? I mean, what is the balance now between sufficiency and efficiency?
In other words, whether the imperial mode of living is questioned.
Yeah, very good.
Okay. Does that?
My name is Benedictus, I'm a student. Thank you for your presentation. And my question would be, we talked a bit about Rio 20 plus, and we could talk about Rio 10 plus. And my question would be, could you imagine step by step the way to implement sustainable development, practical way? Thank you.
Sure.
I am Laura from our professional program, Create for Lithuania, and like you presented very nice theoretical approach to the environmental and other side. But what if we go to the everyday life, like to general people, what they can do to work on it, to improve the situation? That would be the first question. And then I was thinking that maybe, well, what you have like in Austria and Germany, we could adapt that to Lithuania, but I think the main issue we have that like in the strategical level, we have everything written, sustainable development is our priority, and we want to have less polluting technology and industry, but that's not really working in practice. So maybe you have some suggestions how to implement what we really write nicely for in practice.
Well, I mean, I would add to some of these questions that, I mean, if you come up with these ecological, let's put them very broadly, ecological arguments, somewhere in Portugal, Greece, Spain, in terms of for the general public to debate, arguing against growth, I mean, it's very, very difficult to promote these arguments, because what it means is ultimately that more people are unemployed, more people are moving to London, and so on and so forth. I mean, I just came back from Portugal, Lisbon, and I mean, there it's 40 or, well, they say 50 up to 55% of youth unemployed, and and of course I agree with your analysis, but at the same time, in a sense, it is easy to see why kind of neo-Keynesianism is appealing for the kind of center-left in this situation, because it has a kind of not better, but how shall I put it? More dominating, more appealing way of arguing how to get out of the crisis.
Cool. It's another talk. Yeah, thank you very much. This is really excellent. Coming to the efficiency, sufficiency, there is a triangle. It's consistency means to close the material flows. Consistency refers to recycling, to have in the production process less waste and so on, and really to close the material flow. Efficiency means to make the process more productive, the unit of production to produce more effectively with respect to resources. And sufficiency is that the question, what is enough to produce at the end, less in specific areas. In Germany, the public debate is mainly, and let's say in the EU, because now the EU took over the resource agenda, which is quite new. In 2009, 2010, the EU started, due to the rising prices, the competition with China for resources and others, to develop a more or less coherent agenda for resource management. Not only a German question, but coming back to German and Austria. The powerful, and I would say for capitalism, the smoothest, and capitalism always means also trade unions. Capitalism is not only capital, it's also the wage earners who live well if capitalism works well. Coming back then afterwards to your question. The major capitalist solution is efficiency. Naturally, and if you have some slight changes, is consistency, because it has to do with also technological progress. And sufficiency is a hard debate, because it's systemically not capitalist. If capitalism has the tendency to commodify and to make more money capital through a production process to manage capital, or even through financialization, then there is not a lot of space for sufficiency. But I think at the edge of the debate it's gaining. For example, the urban gardening movement, which is quite strong, to regain space within the cities. In Berlin it's quite strong, and to use it collectively, which is not very important for the nutrition of people, but it's a cultural shift that people learn again to cultivate plants. These things are linked to sufficiency. The things to exchange products, to go, I saw here Humana, I'm in a Humana office, yeah? To exchange products is part of this sufficiency movement. I would say it's much more a cultural battle, like in many countries the 68. Yeah? 68, interpreting it with Marcuse, with Herbert Marcuse, or with Jean-Paul Sartre, 68 was the how is it in English? I'm sorry. That asqueroso. Is anybody talking Spanish? Asqueroso. The people hated consumption. Many people. It was a cultural shift. You, with your discipline, working discipline, be happy with your consumption and so on. This disciplined society, which Sartre called this existentialist, the word which doesn't come to my mind. This would be a shift in the sufficiency debate, that the new generation said, no, it's not the good thing to consume more and the most recent things, but it's good for my life, for my identity, and for the environment to exchange the stuff and so on. To reuse the whole movement of the fix-it movement, which is quite strong in the United Kingdom, yeah? To fix things, to repair things, to learn to repair things, is a cultural question. It's not only a technical question. To be proud that I can repair the thing, to be proud to fight against obsolescency, this integrated things in computers, in mobile phones, that they stop to function. Yeah? This is an industrial strategy. Yeah? To build it in that after 4 years such a thing doesn't work again. And so I have to close it because the battery is low. So. Sufficiency is a cultural thing, I would say. It's not only a technical thing. This comes then maybe a bit to the everyday life question, but then I come back to the... I don't like this. Efficiency. Oh, okay. I would say the everyday level is a crucial question, of course. If we are here in educational spaces, in spaces of learning, of thinking society differently, of course this is crucial. And I won't be here an academic to bring in smart arguments, but to have these are, I hope, understood also politically. So, everyday life, we can start with a lot of things. It's education, but I would focus on two things. And this has to do with my interpretation. So sustainability is responsibility. It's lived responsibility. It's not the Sunday discourse of politicians or some leaflets which prior to the Rio Plus 10 or Rio Plus 20, we need sustainability. Sustainability as responsibility means to create different experiences to people. So imagine, now I talked about Vienna, not about Vilnius. I promote in Vienna with others to have a Vienna in the year 2025, in 12 years, 13 years, or 10 years later maybe, to be freed of cars. Not to have any longer cars in Vienna, as a matter of the quality of life of the city. Not the fireworkers, they should be automobile, but others can go. So how to create an imaginary of a Vienna and to link it to the major experience of people, which to me is still the workplace. It's not the Sunday discourse of politicians. It's the major experience of people is the family. It's for some also, let's say, some voluntary work, but it's the workplace. So imagine a discourse in Austria fostered by the management and by the associations, by the Chamber of Commerce, and by the trade unions, by the Chamber of Labor, that a shaping of work has to do with sustainability and has to do with the change of our production system when we want to reduce the production of autos, of cars. And this brings that if we bring people in, this means a reduction of labor time. We shouldn't be fooled. It means for the highly industrialized countries like Austria and Germany, a reduction of industrial production. If not, we are wrong. If we consider that these states need to reduce their production, this means less work in the highly industrialized sectors, in the automobile sector, in the machinery sector, in the chemistry sector, and so on. So this means to make people understandable and to bring people into as subjects, the normal people as subjects into their work, into their life. Yes, we need to change. We need to change the working conditions. We need to reduce our working time. We cannot produce so many cars. I hope that you get the argument. It's not that management says at one time, so we go to maybe Lithuania because there now the automobile industry is booming. We go. This is the capitalist rationality. We go to another place because it's cheaper and better to produce. No, to make it, to bring it together and to negotiate it among the people, but with an horizon of an auto-free Vienna or an auto-poor Austria, if you like, and by reducing the production of cars. This is a bit what my point would be, to bring people in. Yeah? And this is a very comprehensive process, but I would say if we do it below this, we are not serious. Yeah? We are really not serious. So this brings me then briefly to this sustainable development, and then I come to the deep growth. Yes, I would say that sustainable development, and I worked since I was a student, end of the 90s. I was at the Rio conference in 92 because I was living at this time in Buenos Aires, and I went to Rio then. Sustainable development at the beginning was a very diverse debate with quite radical, interesting paths. And this was converted, as with many discourses, if you like, to a program of capitalist modernization. Sustainable development. And to me, still it is. And green economy is still in this tradition, as I outlined. Green economy means that with the capitalist market forces, with investment, with speculation, financial capital, we deal with the problem. So, I refer always to the activists I admire, the radical activists, not the academics, who work in the agricultural sector, in the genetic engineering, the Rafi Group, Pat Mooney, Silvia Rivero, in so many spheres. They say, we go to those conferences to avoid the worst. We don't expect anything from these conferences. And I just recognize this tone, yeah? So that they don't expect anything from the FCCC, the Framework Convention process, from the Rio Plus 30 or Rio Plus 25 and so on. And I think analytically, it's a sound, and politically, they claim it politically. They are the experts for their fields, for their struggles, when they say we don't expect anything from the climate change convention. This would be a bit the answer. However, we should not underestimate the level of international politics. But at the moment, I would say it's not the major priority to act there. It's much more important to struggle within the European Union, in Brussels, in our countries, to avoid the worst and to really reformulate political programs towards a really socio-ecological or radical agenda. It's not the international level, actually. The international level is the most neoliberal level we have, actually, and the European is also quite neoliberalized, but there I see some space of it. And then to this degrowth debate. Interestingly, the most important contributions come from Spain. They come from political ecology around Joan Martínez Allé, who is a political ecologist. And I see this plausibility that the Keynesian answer of growth, there's only one Keynes, there's another Keynes, the Keynes who wrote in the year 1930 the letter to his grandchildren, who said, in the year 2030, everybody will work, in 100 years, 1930 to 2030, everybody will work 15 hours because we can distribute the growth of productivity. And only the today dominant Keynesianism is referring to growth, and then distribution. But I refer to this, and you refer to it. So it's appealing, yes, it's appealing to go for growth, but we should recognize one major assumption of the degrowth debate. The degrowth debate is not to say yes or not to growth. The degrowth debate has a major assumption and a major implication. The major assumption is, if we don't change it by design, it will be changed by disaster. The very, and you don't buy it, but I think it's quite plausible. If we don't change this system, with its economic, political, and ecological implications, it will change, but it will go towards a disaster. And in Germany and Austria, the disaster will less. In Lithuania, it will be middle. And the real disaster, of course, will be in the most vulnerable societies. It will be in Bangladesh. It will be in the countryside of Brazil, where they cultivate the soybean for the sugarcane for the renewable agro fuels for the first world. Yeah, capitalism is quite uneven. I said it at the very beginning. The disaster will not take place in Germany and Austria. It will take place elsewhere. But this is not a progressive position. So, the assumption of the degrowth debate is a change by design. And the change by design does not say yes or no to growth, but to escape from the growth drivers. Of course we need growth for the renewable energies. Of course we need growth against unemployment, but what kind of growth? Is it going back in Spain to the real estate? No, please not. We need other forms of economic production and then to create. So this is the strong. The assumption is change by design and not change by disaster. And I think it's plausible. And the point, the implication is that we need to think the quality, the real quality of production and of living, and not this, and to make us free from the capitalist growth driver. The capitalist growth driver is that if capitalism fails, the crisis is not for capital, as we see in this crisis, the crisis is for ordinary people. This is the growth driver. The crisis is not for the banks. It's not for the asset owners. It's for the 60% of young people in Spain. So how to overcome this? And again, the degrowth debate is not yes or not to growth. It's to acknowledge the capitalist growth drivers and to deal with them more consciously than now. And Keynesianism is not dealing with it. This would be my answer to you. Keynesianism is trusting the capitalist growth drivers, the capitalist growth machinery. And in this combination, change by design and to overcome these drivers, I would say the degrowth debate is very heterogeneous, but it's very, very productive.
Daugiau klausimų, komentarų? Aš labai atsiprašau, dar duosiu tiems, kurie dar nepasisakė. Po to jūs. Susistatykit.
My name is Vilnius, and I would like to ask, do you think it could be a part of solution to price externalities and to include this into the price of the goods, and can this drive to some way of better behaving for most of us?
Jūsų klausimas?
Well, I wanted to try to go back to the reality and everything, and how do you support the green economy in your daily life? What choices do you make? Personally. Personally.
Yes, I said no. Yeah. So what is the personal choice? Would you say?
How in your daily life you support the green economy? The personal choices when you do the grocery shopping or you choose the ways of traveling and other things.
Your possible?
Okay, you mentioned like sustainability is a responsibility. If you have some data, what percentage of people support this idea, like feels responsibility for?
In other words, how dominant is it?
Yes.
I mean, I would add actually, who is the, I mean, this is, you know, a tough question and at the same time, you know, slightly, you know, out there. But still, I mean, who's the subject, so to speak? I mean, if we see, like, there were roughly, historically, 2 social contracts. Kind of in the 17th century when the modern state was created, and the social contract was against, so to speak, the nobility and aristocracy, and it was a kind of Lockean bourgeois first social contract, liberal, right? Classical liberal social contract between the people. Then we have 20th century social contract between labor and capital. And the welfare state was produced and created, and of course it brought massive social progress, brought about massive social progress. Now the third is, you know, it's not clear, and behind any of these social contracts, there were resistance, very strong resistance, and political subject who brought about these fundamental changes. And I mean, the key question is who is the political subject, so to speak, of this new socio-ecological transformation.
Okay.
Can you tell us more about Bolivian budget example?
About
Three times bigger or something. Bolivian budget.
The Bolivian budget.
Example, yes, was 3 times bigger or something like that.
So, I have a question. How to save an Earth from rising, growing population? Because, like, do you believe that people in third world countries can have similar living conditions to these which we own here? Because it's difficult to imagine that we can save resources or something when we have such kind of population growth. And the second thing is aging. So it's very big problems which totally are changing our society. And I haven't heard anything about it in presentation. And it's like, for me, it seems more important than all these financial things and so on. It's just, we can play something with this, but how to play with billions of people and so on.
Thank you. Yeah, probably you didn't hear many things. Of course, I couldn't deal with everything, but this is why we have space for debate and exchange. I think at the global level, or I think there are many studies, UNEP did and others, the FAO study, the famous from 2009 on global agriculture, there is no problem to feed 9 million people. if the system of agricultural production is changed. The industrial agricultural system is not able to do it because the energy input is so high, but it's no problem to have an agroecological or also small-scale production, but also another form of consumption. It's not that everybody can eat everyday meat or something. This is one part, and the FAO study in 2009 said quite clearly, it was very contested, but it was the FAO, yes, we can produce at the global scale this, but we need to produce it differently. The question of rising population, then it's answered, but this is the uneven development. We have aging populations in some countries and very young population in others, so this needs a type of policy, maybe of also migration policy, how to deal with it, but not to think now we take 1 million people from there to there, but to think about it productively. If I hear the debate in Germany, we have not enough well-qualified workers for our high-tech industry. You now imagine now what comes. I say, great. We need to reduce working hours. We need to reduce production. Why do we need to produce in Germany the stuff which might be produced elsewhere better for the consumption there? So I think we should get into this debate. About Bolivia, we can talk. It's a very, very huge issue. We can talk about it later, but I give you some hints. The Morales government, Evo Morales, came into power in 2005 by the MAS, the Partido, the movement towards socialism. This is the name of his party. It's not a member party. The MAS, the movement to socialism, is a party which is constituted by 5 major associations. The workers, the trade unions, and urban people, but the major pillars of the movement are the 2 indigenous associations. And they have in their program, we need to enhance the fiscal basis of the state. And we don't do it by introducing the tax, the VAT, the consumption, because this goes always to the poor. So the first demand was to renegotiate, as I said, the gas contracts. And luckily the gas contracts were not so much with the US industry, but with Petrobras, with the Brazilian industry. And the Lula government says, yes, of course we support it. So the Petrobras paid very, very higher prices for the concessions. This was successful. And this led to this triplication. And one thing, maybe you're interested in Latin America, we could talk about it afterwards, drinking a beer. The second demand of the indigenous peoples associations were the major question of Latin America since hundreds of years, which is the land reform. And the land reform is not dealt with. Not in Brazil, not in Argentina, not in Bolivia, not in Ecuador, not in Venezuela. Never. And the first who tried to introduce a land reform, President Lugo in Paraguay, was 4 weeks afterwards out of office in this cold coup d'etat which happened a year ago. So the tricky question is really for a new development model in Latin America, I don't talk about Europe, but maybe in the Ukraine we could ask the same question, is really a land reform. And this is not that. This is the contradiction of the progressive governments. And now the 2 major indigenous associations split with the Morales government a year ago, and this is a major problem in Bolivia. The externalities, yes, I think in some cases it's absolutely necessary. We need to internalize within the kerosene the price of when we fly. The prices should tell us the ecological reality, which is always politically set, of course. We should pay much more for flights because it's a disaster. We should pay much more for good meat and not for industrialized meat production. But it's not the overall answer. The neoclassic answer is we need the internalization of price, and if this doesn't function, we have market failure, we go to the state. I think this is far too simple. We need also prohibition of things and other stuff. To the green economy and my own practice. Yeah, I flew here, I tried to come by bus for one way and then to fly back for another way. I try to be conscious in my everyday life. For example, I was now very often in Berlin from Vienna, and mainly I took the train, the night train or the day train. The day train takes 10 hours. The nice thing with the Czech day train is that you have draft beer and a cook who cooks for you. So I don't have a mobile phone. I never had a mobile phone. I don't have a car. I try to be conscious in my everyday life. But this answer would be too simple because I'm a transnational activist and scholar, and I fly once a year to Latin America, and then my ecological footprint is destroyed. So my point is, and then I come back to Andrew's question, what is our, and this again is not a moral thing or to action, we should reflect what in our concrete circumstances is our concrete space of action. And I would say, as a university professor who works on international politics and not on urban politics in Vienna, but I work on Latin America, I need this practice, and I send my students to the third world because I think it changes your mind if you lived for half a year in another reality. So, and this is linked a bit to your question. I try to do my real choices in the everyday life that I usually don't eat meat or once a week and I have this, but my point is how to, in my circumstances, how to change the institutional setting I'm working in. So my aim is, I'm now for 5 years professor in Vienna, that within 5 years, every student of political science who finishes a bachelor or a master at my institute knows something in detail and critically about socio-ecological questions. So my everyday struggle is to change the curriculum. Yeah? Or we have a quite feminist institute. Yeah? So they struggled for many years to bring in feminist issues into the curriculum. This would be my answer, my institutional answer. Yeah? So where we are acting, and then I come to your question, and where we are acting and try to shape our concrete surrounding. A bit behind this is from the Horkheimer, the Max Horkheimer concept, which he used when he was the rector of the university in Frankfurt, and he gave his first talk to the students, to the new students in '51, and he said, and Alex Dimirovic wrote a nice book about that with the title, I want to educate you students as critical intellectuals. And critical intellectuals for Horkheimer, for those who in their everyday practice, in their work, in their private life, can reflect critically upon the circumstances and is able to change it in a progressive sense. So it's not the subject question that we need a homogeneous subject, the working class or the post-colonial hero from Hart and Negri, the migrants, yeah? But we need movements, we need constituted political actors, but we need also changes in our institutional practices. And this comes to your point. I think, of course, we need a liberal, welfare, social-ecological contract. We shouldn't give up the historical achievements, of course not. But if we think a socio-ecological transformation seriously, and if you think my point, the imperial mode of living, is at the centerpiece, it's not only the constitution of a subject, a radical green party or radical movements, but how to change the everyday practices towards an attractive mode of production and living. This is my main argument. And this challenges us as political actors, as academics, and as in many other fields, to recognize this challenge and to change our practices and our institutions. So if you are a journalist, you should take it seriously. If you work in a trade union, in a factory, in a restaurant, in the state, in a party, and so on. And this is the difference. There is not any longer a historical subject, a constituted subject. We need identifiable actors, but we need a much more radical move to change the mode of production. This is our everyday practices. And this is the challenge. And if we think an actor can do it, we are not at the level of somebody said system, the problem is the system, we are not at the level of the systemic problems. The systemic problems are really to change the modes and our institutional realities.
Okay, I think Ulrich deserves a round of applause, a good round of applause.